Hello and welcome back. We're back with another deck tech video. Today we are going over my mono black Bontu combo deck. It is June of 2025. It is Pride Month, and I've been slowly sequencing through the decks I have currently active. If you are not familiar with my channel, I'm not really a content creator. I'm not doing this for the likes or subscribes. I don't care if you want to click the buttons. I'm doing this primarily for myself, because I enjoy seeing the history of decks as they change over the eras of EDH, different power creep and card selection as it is known to be good at different times. And we're going through a combo deck that I have ran many years ago. Previously on my channel, you may be familiar with a very Gucci deck piloted by Visara the Dreadful. I think it was 2016, 17, 17 or 18 when the Inventions were out. We ran Visara as a combo commander, making infinite mana and then using something like Enchantments to win the game. A little bit of a boring deck, very expensive deck. All of those cards I ended up selling around 2020. I purged my collection. I went from 40 EDH decks to one EDH deck. That was me collecting money to help keep my ex physically okay, but also to work on my transition. But since then, we've been slowly inching our way back into the format. And I am a Grixis and Rakdos player, so I have one deck of all those color combinations. This is my mono black deck. So let's talk about Bontu for a second and what's going on in this video. So yeah, we're going to do a deck tech for Bontu, but what I'm going to be pushing and emphasizing in this video is that if you want to make a combo deck, and you're gauging it per the power level of those you're playing, then it's always important to know your combo pieces and enabling pieces and recursion to get the combo, but also separating out the diversion tactics. And that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to talk about the combo, and then while I go through the rest of the deck list, I will try to explain diversion tactics versus cards to enable the combo. And that might just help you if you are trying to create your own combo deck, so you can try to make the most efficient deck that you want it to be. So let's start with Bontu, the old Crocodile Lady. I have this beautiful playmat to go with the deck. Gosh, she's so old. I used to have the pre-release version of her, but unfortunately I sold that too. I still have this invocation because I know who opened this piece of paper. I don't like the invocations. The black ones look the best because these colors here match the actual card. But all the other ones that did not look good. She's a little hard to read. It might actually be easier to read this right off my screen, which it is. We have a 3 mana for 4/6 Menace Indestructible, and she cannot attack or block unless a creature has died under my control during that turn. That's irrelevant. I don't care about any of that text so far. Indestructible is nice, but the important part is this last bit. For 2 mana, we can sack another creature, and then if we do, each opponent loses 1 life, we gain 1 life, and we scry 1. Only about 1/3 of that is important. So what we have here is an infinite mana sink. So if we had infinite mana and infinite creatures, we would have the ability to bleed out the opponents. Or if we had infinite mana and a creature that could come back from the graveyard, then that itself would be an infinite win, because we would just be able to completely sack this over and over again, keep buying it back from the graveyard. It's a silly combo. And really, this is the kind of the reason I put this back together. I used to do the Exandronate boring wins with infinite mana, but when I saw this promo, because when you think about reassembling skeleton, do you also think about motorcycles? I think about motorcycles. This card is stupid. But it's so funny, and like, it's just, I had to get this thing. There's a few duplicate parts to this, and I think there's about 7 or 8 creatures total accessible to mono black that could be a resembling skeleton effect. I'm only running 4. Let's get them in play here. So if we have infinite mana and access to one of these 4 creatures in the graveyard, or even in play, we can pop our commander in play, sack it, rebuy it infinitely, and bleed out the table. These 3 are nice because they have 1 toughness, which is convenient for a deck that runs Skull Clamp and a commander that has the ability to sacrifice a creature. This one's a little different. It bleeds the lines between a piece of a combo but also a distraction, because this is an efficient attacker. This is something you can flash out at the end of the opponent's turn and just pop someone for 5 in the air. This is actually a very good card. There's other cards in here. I had a fifth one of these in the deck was this Ozek's skeleton thing from some new set. When it died, it created a token. And when the token died, you picked up the original from the graveyard to your hand. I don't remember the name, but I'll pop a picture onto the screen here, whatever that name was. Didn't need a 5th copy. These were, in my opinion, the best to run in the deck. And realistically, Bontu herself doesn't even come into play unless we're about to combo off, because yeah, she could be a good indestructible blocker in some weird situations or disruption. The text box on this version of the card typically makes her confusing to the opponents, so sometimes they forget that she can't even block. But because of the chance of a Faith Feather's Oubliette effect or something that turns her off in Prison of the Moon, we don't have a lot of ways in this color combination to stop that. She tends to stay in the command zone. But to make the combo work, we have to have infinite mana. So let's get on to how the deck can create infinite mana. If you are very new to the format, you might not be familiar with this card. This is Cabal Coffers. I'm assuming you know what this card is. It will give you black mana based on the number of swamps you control. It doesn't have to be basic. But if you have an enabling effect, you can make that even better, like an Urborg. So these would both be swamps. So they could tap and include themselves when you count the numbers. Another good effect is something like Deserted Temple, because you can use 1 mana to untap this land. Say, for example, you get 5 mana out of your Cabal Coffers, right? Then you'll use 1 of that mana here to untap this land. And you can go to 2 mana floating, using 2 more mana to tap it again. So you're up more mana. You would have 7 mana total. That's just assuming you had 5 swamps. There's a way of turning this into a combo to make infinite mana, and that is with Rings of Briarhearth. Let's make sure these are all nice and centered here. This is an activated ability. Rings only copies non-mana abilities, but this is activated. So you float some mana off your coffers. You pay 1 to untap this land. But you can then pay 2 mana right here to copy this untap trigger on the stack using whatever floating mana you have. And you can choose to untap this land. So they're both untapped. And if you have enough swamps in play, enough floating mana, you can continue this chain, creating infinite black mana. This is just off of 2 lands and 1 artifact. And that's actually very hard to deal with your opponents, because you are activating these at instant speed. They can respond to you making targets, but it's a very difficult thing to interact with, being 2 of the 3 cards are in your lands. Let's go on to another infinite mana combo. This is a classic one. This is very similar. This is a creature version of Cabal Coffers. It's a creature that has the exact same text box, but we can't use a land to untap him, but we have equipment. Not recently unbanned, I'm showing my age. Staff of Domination used to be on the ban list a very long time ago, because it had so much combo potential. But right here, we have the ability to untap target creature, and he taps for mana, and the staff can untap itself. So if we have a specific threshold of swamps, once again, we can utilize this to untap him and the staff and continue on. There are 2 other untap effects in the deck, just like there's duplicate parts of some things, and these all work just with Magus of the Coffers. So these are the ways that this deck can create infinite black mana. Now, those are the important key parts of the deck. I may reference those cards shortly, but what we're going to do now is we're going to run through the rest of the cards in the deck, and I will try to emphasize what is enabling the deck to get to the point where it can win, and then the cards that are distractions. The distractions are the cards that are unique to who you play against, and you can tailor them to cards you like, cards you know that will mess with your specific opponents and your friends. That is where it's going to be customizable to you. And of course, this is something you can take the shell for any combo, really. If you have a specific color combination that does a specific combo you like, this is kind of like a generic guide of how you can get there. Let's set the pretty Crocodile Lady over here, and let's talk about creatures. Now, while we're getting to those creatures, I should go ahead and mention the bracket system and the power level of this deck. This deck is considered bracket 3 because we have a few game changers. I think we only have 2, and they're just the obvious tutors. There could be more. I have a spot for 1 extra that will probably be in here just if I get that card, but it is a dedicated combo deck. The problem is the power creep that we've been exposed to in the past few years. I would say before 2020, this deck would have been considered a high-powered but not CEDH level deck. Because this is still a combo deck, but this is a combo deck that requires a specific number of lands in play, it is impossible for this deck to combo quick and early. There are other infinite mana combos that you can run in Mono Black using Gravecrawler shenanigans, Nim Deathmantle, Graveyard Loop kind of things. And those are just vulnerable. I don't know if I would ever want to put them in here. I like this deck exactly how it is. But this deck, I don't think, could ever be considered a bracket 4 simply because it cannot combo quickly. It has no potential to go off earlier than having 7 or 8 lands in play. And that's not something that Mono Black can just always consistently do. But let's go ahead and through this. That's why I actually mentioned that first. Lands are important. That is actually a part of the combo. We have to have a threshold of swamps. Otherwise, the Magus and the Coffers, they don't do enough for us. We have to generate enough mana to loop. So we have a few things that get lands into play. The Canoptic Wraith is fantastic. Burnished Heart and Scampering Surveyor and Solemn Simulacrum. Scampering Surveyor is here specifically because it can get a cave. There's a few ways to get Cabal Coffers in the deck. Tutors, obviously. Expedition Map, obviously. But the newest version is Urza's Cave. Urza's Cave is a cave that can get any land from your deck and put it into play. And then we have a nice little dude that can go get Urza's Cave and put it right into play. So there's a small little sequence of events you can do to get Cabal Coffers into play off of this. It takes time because they all come into play tapped, but that is one of the routes. So we have these 4 guys that are just here entirely to put swamps or lands into play. The Wraith, I do really like this card. It seems slow, just really bad. It's kind of like a worse Burnished Heart. But we are in a deck that is running the swords, like Sword of the Animist, that gets swamps into play, which is what we want, and it is an unblockable creature. So it's one of those things that sometimes it seems really bad, but it sometimes is actually worth reanimating because it helps your game plan of getting the lands needed. Let's go on down here. Now we have what is probably the first diversion tactic is Braids. She is fantastic at, we don't care about sacking anything other than lands. We can sack herself if we need. She can't sack herself. Either way, this is a diversion tactic to help us draw extra cards. Fantastic card is fantastic. Same thing, we don't actually need double mana. It helps, it can actually help, but this is essentially spot removal bait. This is the kind of card that opponents will see and fear. Like, you can tell your opponents you're not playing Exsanguinates. Most of them might not believe you. But this is the kind of card that rarely survives a turn cycle. This will get the removal out of their hands for you. Disciple Bolus is another wonderful way of drawing cards. We have a few rather thick, dummy thick demons in this deck, and this card is fantastic at getting us some extra life. There's a lot of life pay effects that hurt us over the long game, and there's a good way of stabilizing. Xiao Dun is a fantastic card. This is probably more essential in a deck like this because we don't have regrowth and eternal witness effects. We obviously have things like a reanimation effects, a Yawgmoth package, but sometimes that gets out of your hand. And if you have a Yawgmoth will, you might as well run Xiao Dun because you need to pick up that Yawgmoth will if it gets countered. This picks up any black card. This is fantastic to sequence with a reanimate effect because you can then pick up the reanimate to get something else. There are a lot of lines with Xiao Dun. He is a little confusing. You can only use him on your pre-combat main phase. So don't try to hold him back for instant speed shenanigans. Gonti is perfect for disruption. It is a death touch body. It will make people not want to attack you. you can get a good card out of your opponents. If you're looping creatures in and out of play of your graveyard, you can get a nice stack of secret cards to play with. Rev is very similar to Gonti. She doesn't have Death Touch herself, but she will give us a nice selection of cards to interact with the opponents and a few treasures. This is literally the best definition of disruption that we have for early game antics. These are the kind of cards that we would see in a normal Bontu deck that might not be going for a combo. These are just good cards to have in a attacking deck. And that's kind of what we're pretending to be in the earlier stages of the game. Violent Tumor is one of many tutors in the deck. Notably, this gets any card. It does not have to be a creature card. We can put a Cabal Coffers into our graveyard. We have a Crucible of Worlds in the deck. So we can use this to then play Cabal Coffers from the graveyard if we have that Crucible. This is great for any deck that has reanimation style cards. It's also, I don't know if this is a misprint, but this particular version is wildly dark, like crazy faded out. It's strange. Gravebreaker Lamia is the same way. This one can put any card in the graveyard, and if we do a Yawgmoth Will turn, she does discount the spells we cast from the graveyard. It is somewhere between useful, the mana cost is a little bit higher. It is a lifelinking body, so she sometimes is nice just to throw out early with a generically threatening target in the graveyard to reanimate later. Maybe we'll just pop a demon or something scary in the graveyard that we might reanimate later, just to have a lifelinking chump blocker, because that's the kind of diversion tactic we want, just to delay. Same thing, Sidisi, another Death Touch temporary blocker, a tutor that's helping us to stall for the first few turns till we get later. Shieldred, exactly the same thing. This is literally here just to annoy and agitate the opponents, make them sack whatever is going on that we can't interact with. The flip side is pretty good. I will show that on the screen here so I don't have to disleave my card, but this is mainly here as an early game, 5 mana, not really that early game, as a creature to pop out early to ward off some threats to slow down the opponents while we develop to our win con. This is another tutor. This one gets 2 different cards. One goes to your hand, one to the graveyard, your opponent's choice. If you have multiple cards with duplicity, that's what you're looking to do here. For example, if you have a Yawgmoth's Will in your deck and a Xiaodun, you can get Yawgmoth's Will and Xiaodun. No matter what one of those is gone to your hand, you can use Xiaodun to pick up the Yawgmoth's Will. If you have Animate Dead and Necromancy, 2 enchantments that do basically the same thing, you can get both of those cards, you're good to go. Because we are putting things into our graveyard, you can also just go grab 2 of the win condition creatures. Now we have a fun demon. I like this demon. Let's get these out of the way for a second. When I first read this seemed like such a try-hard card, but then I realized what you could do with the stack if you have access to instant speed sacrifice. So what you can do is you can stack things. You can pay this ability, then you can pay this ability again. Let me get that out of the light. Oh, there's a blind spot there. What we can do is here, you can pay this ability to draw 7. Then you can pay this ability again, draw 7 if you retain priority. Then you can retain priority again before any of these draws happen, and you can sacrifice to Bontu, allowing you to essentially pay, if you want just 7 cards, you can pay 5 mana, pay 3 to draw 7, then sack to Bontu. This will be gone before this whole exile thing happens. If you have more mana, then you can just keep doing that. If you have 8 mana, you can draw 14 cards. That's a very good effect. We have Giggles, the classic mono black tricky reanimation card just to get people with the... This just randomly kills people. It's the funniest thing. It's always worth playing Giggles. We have Old Razzle Dazzle and Velus. These 2 just... They're not necessary for the deck. These are the kind of big, scary, bomby... If you reanimate these early and they don't get answered by your opponents, you're going to run away with the game. But these are not necessary. These are like the biggest threats to scare the opponents into like taking immediate action. But being that you can sacrifice things at instant speed, if you have like another dirtly dude, like a reassembling skeleton and Razzle Dazzle, Razaketh, I need to stop saying that. Like if you have access to a recurring dude in Razaketh, or if you just have extra black mana to work with, you're going to get so far ahead in the game if the opponents don't stop what you're doing. Let's go on to the spells. This is a gigantic stack of spells. Normally I do this by instant and sorcery type, like card type, but I'm keeping them by what the spells do for the ease of this video. Now, as I said, there are 2 game changers in this deck. We have a vampiric and a demonic tutor. I mean, if you've been a fan of my channel ever since 2010, every Black Splash deck that has a combo in it has these 2 cards. And I know they're game changers. There could be a 3rd game changer in here, but I don't know what it would be. I don't think this is a Bolas Citadel style deck. I don't really want to buy another Ancient Tomb. What I might do is get a random Grim Monolith if I can find a seller I trust, because the counterfeit market is insane right now. And I might put that in as a 3rd one just to have access to it if I want that card later. But these are two tutors, the best tutors in the color that we have these options for. Obviously the deck has a lot more tutors. This is a new tutor that has potential alternatives. Usually this is a 5 mana, draw 3, one of them being the best card you need. I really do recommend that people play this more because the financial investment on this card is so low. And being that you can hit this off of ad nauseum for 1 hit, like 1 hit point, that's a fantastic card. Entomb puts anything from our deck into the graveyard. It could be a resembling skeleton, it could be a land, whatever we need. We have Shred Memory, a little bit of graveyard hate, true, but this tutors for 2 drops, so it could be something like a resembling skeleton, it could be something like an Animate Dead. There's a significant number of 2 mana spells in this deck, and having access to a little bit of graveyard hate at the same time, this is a very versatile card. This is one of my pet favorite cards. So this is kind of probably a card that needs to be replaced. Just being honest with you, but I like this card. Praetor's Grasp is one of my favorite cards to run in black, just like Gonti. This is kind of a disruptive card. Yeah, the opponent might have something that could help the game plan, the combo goal. Or you can just get whatever card is necessary to really mess with them. I think last time I used this just to get a fog. Like a Holy Day effect, I think. Can't remember the name of the card. It was the green one, the free commander, whatever, fog effect. But just this type of effect where you are spending the time to look through an opponent's deck, it is disruptive and discouraging enough to them that they may not be able to focus on your combo or what you're doing. Sign in Blood is a generic filler. This could be anything else from a Night's Whisper to a bigger draw spell. I just like Sign in Blood. I like getting kills with Sign in Blood because this targets a player. And I used to do this in Modern because I had a burn deck that used this as a burn spell sometimes. Since random opponents sometimes like to get themselves real low in life, and if you have a random burn target player for 2, it's just funny. Moonlight Bargain, very similar. This is a way of drawing very deep. I always recommend this card in a deck that runs any kind of reanimation strategy because you can just dump the shit you don't want in your hand into the graveyard. If you draw, like, look at the top 5 and one of them's an Animate Dead and one of them's a Razaketh, why would you put the Razaketh in your hand when you can just put it in the graveyard and cast your Animate Dead? This is an instant speed spell. Make sure you always use the spell at the end of an opponent's turn. That gives you the most opportunity to utilize your graveyard before anyone can interact while you have the most mana. Reanimate is the obvious. It's going to be in here, obviously. Like, we have so many gigantic things to reanimate, any specific combo parts that are creature-based. Looping this with, like, a Xiaodun or something like that is fantastic. Corpse Dance is very specifically in here for one very, very specific reason. Let's get the old Magus back here. Corpse Dance is a buyback reanimation spell that gets the top creature. So if we entomb something like a Magus into the graveyard, we will get the top creature. The most important part of Corpse Dance is the fact that it gives haste to the card. We don't have haste on this card unless we have some other effect that gives haste. Corpse Dance gives haste. You can also do the trick where, because it gets rid of it at the beginning of the next end step, it's not the end of turn. You can Corpse Dance something at the end of an opponent's turn, during like their discard phase or whatever, and you can retain that creature for the turn cycle. And then, of course, we can sacrifice it to our commander or whatever we want to do. Buyback on this card is fantastic. There's a reason this card's wildly expensive, but the most important thing to remember here, this gives haste. The Magus needs to be able to tap if we want to use it for a combo. Haste. Victimize is one of my classically favorite cards. We can sacrifice a resembling skeleton for 2 gigantic demons. That's a hell of a buy. And Beacon of Unrest. This is a 5-mana reanimation spell, but what most people forget is that this can hit an artifact. We have a number of very important artifacts in the deck. Rings of Bright Hearth, any of these untap effects. This is one way of reanimating an artifact. It also shuffles into our deck, so we can utilize, if we have some effect where we are drawing our entire deck. I was thinking about building the new Gix. I love Gix as a commander, and I was thinking about using him as an infinite mana source to exile everybody's decks. Instead of the normal Gix run where you have a bunch of little creatures to attack with, and the idea was to use an Eldrazi to discard and keep shuffling my deck in, but finding a way of drawing my deck using like Staff of Domination. And I was putting in a few ways to just anti-deck myself. That was a weird tangent. But something like this is fantastic because parts of our combo require artifacts, and this is a reanimation for an artifact. There is the Yogg Will, strangely enough, not a game-changing card. I think it's just because of the financial value of this card. I love this artwork. Ron Spencer's fantastic, if you ever have a chance. But being able to rebuy anything is very important. Now, what we do need to note is that cards going to the graveyard while under the effect of Yogg Will, they're exiled forever. So we cannot use this on the turn we're trying to combo. Because if we do sacrifice our resembling skeleton, it will be exiled. What we can do is combo at instant speed. Because the effects of putting creatures into play only require mana, we don't have to cast anything. We can set ourselves up on a turn and then pass the turn, and on the opponent's upkeep, make infinite mana and start the sacrifice sequence that way. Just make sure you don't put anything, sacrifice anything, entomb anything vital while you're under the effect of Yogg Will. But also that Gravebreaker Lamia, pretty good. It helps discount your spells. Let's go on. These are now interactive spells, ways of sustaining throughout the game. We have a Toxic Deluge and some board wipe effects. We have Damnation. These are all actually just kill cards. My stack got a little shiny. These sleeves are unfortunately very slippery and shiny. They're making the reflective stuff pop more on my camera, but they are very slick. Black Suns is a card that has not aged well. I've just been holding on to this since I won this card. I like the card. It's fun. It unfortunately does put negative counters on our indestructible commander. This should be replaced with a newer card. It's another one of those cards that also shuffles itself in, so you're immune to being decked, as long as you have access to that card in hand. We have a Force of Despair. This is another one of my favorite artists by Seb McKinnon. Every deck I have has, I think, at least one artwork piece by Seb McKinnon because his art is phenomenal. This is just a potential free spell. It destroys all creatures that came into play that turn. Good answer to like a Tooth and Nail Entwine kind of effect. And then we have a Flare of Malice. Another way of just sacrificing a free black card like a Resembling Skeleton for a wonderful Edict effect. And you know, I love my trolley cards. I don't have Darkness in this deck, but I had to have some way of stopping people from target exiling something I needed. And Imp's Mischief is just funny. This is one of the cards that has sustained in my collection through me selling out everything. It sat in a binder, untouched, unused for a number of years. We're forcing it in this deck. Let's go on to the Enchantments. Now, one of my favorite enchantments, another card that has sustained in my collection throughout the years, is Phyrexian Reclamation. This is very close to being a combo piece with our commander and any creature that's not like a Resembling Skeleton, because we can continue to pay 2 mana and 2 life to get it back to hand. So if we had infinite mana and like any creature at all, we could sack it here for 2 and then pick it up, but we're losing 1 life in this exchange because we're gaining 1 here, but we lose 2 here. So it's almost a part of the combo, but it's not quite there yet. The only time I would recommend even thinking about using this as a combo piece for this strategy is if you either had like an Aristocrat in play, like a Blood Artist effect, which my deck does not run those, or if you have twice as much health as your opponents do. and they're not playing like a random lightning bolt. But I just love this card. This is one of my classic favorites. It's been in almost every black creature-based deck. This is the linchpin of my Grandeur EDH deck. I don't know if I actually showed that video or not. Oh gosh, I think it was still private. I never published it. Yeah, there's a deck list I made about 2013 or 2014, which used Grandeur, the mechanic Grandeur from Future Sight, as a commander deck, and I played that for a couple months with friends. It was a wild deck, but this is the linchpin of that deck. Then we have these two enchantments here for reanimation, a Necromancy and an Animate Dead. The third option, being Dance of the Dead, is the worst of the three, but these are my two favorites for the enchantments that reanimate. The potential flash usually scares people. It just gets things out of hand. The last card here is sometimes an enchantment, sometimes a removal spell. It usually gets cast early as a removal spell, but then it just sets an exile, and I honestly don't bother with this. This is potentially a replaceable card in my list. Like, I really like what the card's trying to do, but my deck doesn't need this effect. It would be another diversion tactic at that point. And that's a very expensive diversion tactic. There is one other non-artifact permanent, and that's one Planeswalker. All of my decks always run one Planeswalker. This is a personal preference I've done for years. It gives me the potential to feel like I have to protect the Planeswalker more, and it's usually something on theme. This deck is running this particular Liliana because it will help me draw a bunch of cards whenever I randomly sack things to Bontu. I do have to be careful. This is not a May ability. So if I am trying to go infinite and an opponent has more life than I have cards in my deck, I will deck myself. I don't have a Hero's Downfall to kill this Planeswalker. That has never happened. I've never gotten to a game state like that before, because Liliana is usually a kill quick kind of card. This is a diversion tactic. It is a draw mechanic, yes, but we almost always put her in play, immediately make everyone sack 2 creatures, and then she dies. That's usually how this plays out. It is a diversion tactic for the opponents to deal with while you're building your board state. Now let's go to the artifacts here. As expected, every EDH deck is going to have a Soul Ring. Wayfarer's Bauble is a card that has sustained the test of time. It gets basics into play for us, and it's a fantastic card. Even if we're just having an early game, we don't have anything to do except Yogg-Will 2 spells out of our graveyard. It's a fantastic thing to have in the graveyard. It does get swamps, which is what we need, so this is an auto include in this style of deck. We have the Expedition map. This gets any non-basic out of our deck. It specifically is here primarily for Cabal Coffers. There is a new version of Expedition map that was spoiled. It's coming out in this Final Fantasy set in a few days. It is essentially a reprint of Expedition map that has 2 abilities. I don't know the name of it, but it costs 3 to get any land to your hand. I'll pop an image of it on the screen if I can. But that will most likely make its way in the deck. Just another duplicate way of getting Cabal Coffers. We have a Crucible Worlds. This is one of my favorite cards ever printed. Any chance or any reason to run this in a deck is fantastic. We don't have fetch lands, but we have a Myriad Landscape and an Urza's Cave. And we have cards like Entomb and Vile Entomber and the Lamia that can put cards from our deck into the graveyard. Which means we can use that to get a Cabal Coffers or some kind of utility. Even if you're just seeing like a Myriad Landscape early game, and you can do that every turn with this, that's still a very good, slow, but very good advantage. Mirren Safe House is here for the exact same reason. We might have a Cabal Coffers in the graveyard. This would have, thus, the Cabal Coffers ability. We could have an Urza's Cave or a Mirren Safe House in the graveyard, or even an opponent might have a fetch land in their graveyard. Either way, this is going to be, at worst case scenario, a 3-mana do nothing, or a 3-mana like Evolving Wilds, or it could be just a second Cabal Coffers. We have a Skull Clamp to go with those 3 1 toughness creatures. Our commander can sacrifice any creature. It turns anything into card advantage. We have the Swifty Boots. This is here exclusively for the Magus. I don't normally run boots for protection. Sometimes they seem to be necessary. In this deck, I do believe this is necessary. I cannot use Lightning Greaves. Lightning Greaves gives Shroud. and the Magus requires untap effects. Some of them target him, like the other equipment doesn't target him, but we still have to be able to untap him. So Lightning Greaves, no. Swiftfoot Boots, yes. We have the equipment. These 3 get lands from our deck and put it straight into play. These are ways of getting swamps into play sooner than we would normally have access to. So we don't have to wait till turn 8 or 9 to combo. And each of these, we have a bunch of dirty little creatures in this deck. We don't care if they die half the time. So it's perfectly fine just to throw these out and just get some extra value while we can. Let's go on to the lands to wrap up the video. There are these non-basic lands. We already talked about, I think, every one of them. Mirror Landscape, generic value piece. It 2 for 1s yourself to get you 1 for 2s yourself to get you an extra swamp. We have access to things like a Crucible Worlds, Mirror and Safe House ways of getting more utility. Even the Rings of Brighthearth can be used on this to get 4 swamps into play. Fantastic. Urza's Cave, same thing. This can be used to go get the Cabal Carvers, put it straight into play. You can double the ability if you have a Rings of Brighthearth. I should have probably mentioned more effects Rings of Brighthearth helps with, because there's a lot of activated abilities in this deck. Even something like Razaketh, if you only had 1 creature to sacrifice, you can still pay 2 and copy the effect for more tutors. We have Deserted Temple to combo with the Cabal Coffers, and the Urborg to make these all swamps. This is just here for efficiency. If I were to add 2 more, the rest of the lands are basic lands, but if I were to add more non-basics to this deck, I would probably get a Lake of the Dead. That's one of my favorite cards from Pete Venters. I love the artwork. I have a bit of his artwork signed up here on the wall, and if I can, I will go ahead and throw some B-roll footage of the beautiful artwork. I sold all copies of my Lakes of the Dead, unfortunately. They are pricey, and I needed the money. But I would probably get one of those for this deck. I do know that an Ancient Tomb is always a strict upgrade for every deck, but that falls in the category of game changers. And there's a few other non-basics that would be actually playable here, but I still have, from my very old decks, the same exact 32 swamps from the Rise of the Zendikar, Rise of the Eldrazi set. And they're these cryptid, like, cuboid things, like, I don't know what it is about these swamps. I've had these since they were in Standard, and they're so pretty in foil. They just look all bizarre. I don't know, I'm cryptid at heart, so this is one of those things like I held on to in my purging era. I had a binder full of basic lands, and we saved these. That's a part of my history. So, now that is my current Bontu list. I think I hit all the major points of all the combos. There's a few more interactions I'm sure I missed. But I really like this Crocodile Lady. The problem is, of course, like, it is a combo deck, and it has a pair of game changers in it. But the speed of that combo is vulnerable. Like, we will fall to any faster deck that can interact faster or combo faster. I don't think there's anything that can be done to this deck that could efficiently make it the same combo in a bracket 4, no matter how many game changers and hateful cards we put in here. I don't think there's any way of making it that powerful. But if we take the 2 tutors out, being that it is a combo deck, it is inappropriate to run that in a bracket 2. So this has to remain a bracket 3 deck. And I'll probably figure out some third game changer to put in here just to have it in here. I am thinking, like, I don't want a Chrome box because I don't want to exile things. I do need to buy a Grim Tutor at some point, or a Grim Monolith at some point. But that's just expensive, and there's an issue with the counterfeit market right now that I'm having some conniptions with. But yeah, this is my current Bontu list. If you have any feedback, I'm always welcome. I love playing these older... It's hard to call Bontu older. To me, this is still a new card. Although this is now 8 years old, I believe, at the time of recording. Original Amonkhet came out 2016, 17, something like that. That's 8 years, I think, now. To me, this is still a new card, even though to many people this is an old card. But unfortunately, I can't really make my beautiful Visara come back the way I want it to. It would be an infinite mana combo deck using Exsanguinates and Torments of Hailfires, and that is a boring win condition, in my opinion. It always has been. I do miss that old video. If you want to see some really Gucci things, all of those inventions from that deck literally helped me survive. Like, I sold all of those inventions that helped me survive the pandemic. So I am grateful for the old Visar deck, how it helped me, but I do miss it. I just don't think there's any way I can make Visara work anymore. So we're going to stick with the beautiful Crocodile Lady. If you have any of these old nostalgic commanders, definitely share it with me. I would love to see them. Have a wonderful month. Bye.